She stood in the doorway of her small apartment, clutching her daughter's hand as the landlord's cold words echoed. "You have 1 week to leave." A black single mother, barely scraping by, faced the crushing weight of eviction in a city that seemed to chew up dreams like hers. But in just weeks, she didn't just reclaim her home, she bought the entire building, turning the tables on a system that tried to break her. How did she do it? This is the story of resilience, defiance, and a stunning comeback. Whether you're reading this from New York, London, Chicago, or Manchester, this story of one woman's triumph will hit home. Share your thoughts. What would you do if the system tried to push you out? Drop your city in the comments, and let's see where this story resonates. Sheila Jackson was no stranger to struggle. A 34-year-old single mother of two, she lived in a modest 2-bedroom apartment in a low-income neighborhood of Atlanta, Georgia. The building, a weathered brick structure on Maple Street, housed a dozen families, many of whom were just getting by. Sheila worked as a nurse's aide, pulling double shifts at a local hospital to keep food on the table for her children, 8-year-old Meyer and 12-year-old Jamal. Her life was a balancing act. Bills, school supplies, and rent always seemed to demand more than her paycheck could cover. But Sheila was a fighter, known in her community for her warmth, her hustle, and her unshakable faith that things would get better. The landlord, Harold Grayson, was a different story. A middle-aged real estate investor with a reputation for cutting corners, Harold owned several properties in Atlanta's poorer neighborhoods. He was the kind of man who saw tenants as numbers, not people. Complaints about leaky pipes or broken heaters were met with excuses or outright silence. For Sheila, dealing with Harold was a monthly ordeal. Late rent payments, even by a day, sparked threatening voicemails or notices taped to her door. Still, she paid what she could, often sacrificing her own needs to keep a roof over her kids' heads. In early 2025, Atlanta's housing market was a pressure cooker. Gentrification was creeping into Maple Street, with developers eyeing the area for luxury condos and trendy coffee shops. Harold, sensing an opportunity, began tightening the screws on his tenants. For Sheila, the trouble started in March when a hospital staffing shortage cut her hours. She fell behind on rent, and Harold was quick to pounce. By April, he'd served her an eviction notice, claiming she'd violated the lease with late payments. Sheila pleaded, explaining her situation, but Harold was unmoved. "This is business," he said, his voice flat. "You're out in 7 days." The eviction notice hit Sheila like a freight train. She stood in her kitchen, the paper trembling in her hands, as Maya tugged at her sleeve, asking why she looked so scared. Sheila didn't have an answer. The thought of uprooting her kids, of losing their home, was unbearable. She spent sleepless nights scouring legal aid websites and calling tenant advocacy groups. But the system seemed stacked against her. Harold had the law on his side. Georgia's landlord-friendly policies made evictions swift and brutal. Sheila's neighbors, too, were reeling. Harold had issued notices to 3 other families, citing lease violations or plans to renovate the building. The confrontation came on the 6th day. Sheila, backed by a tenant advocate named Carla, met Harold at the property. The air was thick with tension as they stood in the hallway, neighbors peeking from cracked doors. Carla, a seasoned activist with a sharp tongue, laid into Harold. "You're targeting low-income families to flip this building for profit," she accused, her voice rising. "You think you can just throw people out on the street?" Harold smirked, adjusting his glasses. "This is my property. I can do what I want. If she can't pay, she can't stay." Sheila's heart pounded, but she stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear. "You know I've been paying what I can. I've got kids, Harold. Where are we supposed to go?" "Plenty of shelters in Atlanta," he shot back, his tone dripping with disdain. "Maybe you should have thought about that before falling behind." Carla jabbed a finger at him. "You're raising rents to push us out while you court developers. We know your game." Harold's face reddened. "You don't know a damn thing. This building's a money pit, and I'm done with deadbeat tenants." He turned to Sheila. "Pack your stuff, or the sheriff will do it for you." The words cut deep, but Sheila refused to break. As Harold stormed off, Carla pulled her aside. "Is not invincible?" Carla whispered. "We can fight this, but you need a plan." That night, Sheila sat at her kitchen table, her kids asleep, and made a vow she wouldn't just fight to stay, she'd find a way to win. Sheila's first move was to rally her neighbors. She knocked on doors, sharing her story and urging others to stand together. The group formed a tenants association, with Carla's guidance, to challenge Harold's evictions. They filed complaints with the city, citing code violations in the building, leaky roofs, faulty wiring, mold in the basement. The violations were real. Harold had neglected maintenance for years. The city issued fines, but Harold brushed them off, confident he could sell the building to a developer and walk away rich. Meanwhile, Sheila dug deeper. She spent her evenings researching housing laws and real estate, fueled by coffee and determination. A friend from church, Marcus, worked at a community development corporation, CDC, and tipped her off to a little-known program, a federal grant for low-income residents to purchase multi-family properties. The catch? It required a down payment and a solid business plan. Sheila had neither, but Marcus saw her fire. "You're not just fighting for you," he said. "You're fighting for everyone in that building. Let's make this happen." Sheila threw herself into the grant process. She took online courses on property management, worked with Marcus to draft a proposal, and leaned on Carla for legal advice. The numbers were daunting. The building was valued at $2 million, and the grant would cover only 70% of the purchase price. Sheila needed $360,000 for the down payment, an impossible sum for a woman with $200 in her savings account. But she didn't quit. She reached out to local nonprofits, pitched her story to community investors, and even started a crowdfunding campaign that gained traction after a local news outlet picked it up. Harold, meanwhile, was doubling down. He hired a lawyer to push the evictions through, and by mid-May, sheriff's deputies were knocking on doors. Sheila's neighbors were terrified. One family moved out, unable to fight. But Sheila's resolve only grew. She confronted Harold again, this time in court during an eviction hearing. The room was packed with tenants, reporters, and activists. Harold's lawyer argued that Sheila's late payments justified the eviction, but Carla countered with evidence of Harold's code violations and discriminatory practices. "You're not just evicting me," Sheila said, standing tall in the courtroom. "You're targeting black families, poor families, to make a quick buck. You think we're disposable, but we're not." The judge, moved by the tenant's testimony, granted a temporary injunction, halting the evictions for 30 days. It was a small victory, but it bought Sheila time. Behind the scenes, her crowdfunding campaign exploded, raising $50,000 in a week. A local philanthropist inspired by her story pledged $100,000. Marcus connected her with a credit union willing to finance the remaining $210,000 if she could prove the building's income potential. Sheila worked around the clock, crunching numbers and building a case that the building could generate steady rental income with proper management. Harold, sensing trouble, tried to sabotage her. He spread rumors that the building was condemned, scaring off potential investors. He even showed up at Sheila's door one night, his voice low and menacing. "You think you're slick, huh? You'll never pull this off. This is my building." Sheila didn't flinch. "Not for long," she said, slamming the door. By June, Sheila's plan came together. The grant was approved, the credit union signed off, and her crowdfunding campaign pushed her over the finish line. On June 15, 2025, Sheila stood in a lawyer's office, signing the papers to purchase 123 Maple Street for $2 million. The room erupted in cheers. Marcus, Carla, and a dozen neighbors were there, tears in their eyes. Sheila, now the owner, wasn't just saving her home, she was saving theirs too. Harold was livid. When he learned Sheila had outbid his developer contacts, he stormed into the CDC's office, shouting about lawsuits. But the deal was done, and Harold had no legal ground to stand on. The Tenants Association, now led by Sheila, set new rules: fair rents, prompt repairs, and a voice for every resident. Sheila hired a property manager to handle day-to-day operations, but she made the big decisions. She even offered Harold's former tenants the chance to return, and 2 families did. The news spread like wildfire. Local papers ran headlines: "Evicted single mom buys her building in stunning turnaround." Sheila's story inspired tenants across Atlanta to fight back against predatory landlords. She became a speaker at housing rallies, her voice carrying the weight of her victory. "This isn't just about me," she told a crowd of hundreds. "It's about all of us who've been told we don't matter. We do, and we can win." For Harold, the loss was a bitter pill. He sold his other properties and left Atlanta, his reputation in tatters. Sheila, meanwhile, was just getting started. She enrolled in a real estate course, determined to buy more buildings and create affordable housing for families like hers. Maya and Jamal, proud of their mom, started calling her the boss lady. Sheila laughed it off, but deep down, she knew it was true. This story isn't just a headline. It's a call to action. If you're in Atlanta, Chicago, London, or anywhere else, take a page from Sheila's book. Fight for your rights, rally your community, and don't let anyone tell you your dreams are out of reach. Share this story, tag your city, and let's keep the momentum going. Who's next to turn the tables?